Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada Nittai Gora Haribol 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 Nittai Gora Haribol Shishi Radha Gokulananda ki, Shishi Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shishi Gornitai ki, Jagat Guru Prabhupada ki, Nittai Gaur Pramanande. Hare Krishna. So, while we're trying to fix the mic, we're going to just start with a short invocation, and then we're going to speak, then a short discussion. Hare Krishna. So, before we start the session, before we start this Bhagavad Gita class, we're just going to pray a little invocation. Om Jnana Timandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashachadeshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we're reading from the Bhagavad Gita with a little discussion, and then we're going to try and open up for a short Q&A. So this is chapter 6 from the Bhagavad Gita, entitled Dhyana Yoga, verse 36, which is 34 actually, which is an incredible verse personally I find. So we'll read in Sanskrit and then the transliteration. And for time's sake, we'll just recite it once, and then we're going to get into the purport. Hare Krishna. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna Pramati balavaddhirdam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayo eva shodhushkaram. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna Pramati balavaddhirdam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayo eva shodhushkaram. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna Pramati balavaddhirdam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayo eva shodhushkaram. Maybe one devotee from the Prabhu section. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna Pramati balavaddhirdam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayo eva shodhushkaram. Mataji's. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna Pramati balavaddhirdam Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayo eva shodhushkaram. Translation. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think is more difficult than controlling the wind. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. Although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence, for a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium towards both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. In the Vedic literature Katha Upanishad 1.3.3.4, it is said, the individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. The mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses, so it is understood by great thinkers. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. As an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine, such a strong mind is supposed to Such a mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga. But such a practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance. In all humility, the method prescribed is Savai Mana Krishna Padarvendayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. So just repeat. The mind is so restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So, Vanchakalpa Tirubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Bievacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Anantakoti Vaishnavindaki. It's so wonderful to be among so many wonderful Vaishnavas, and it's been such a long while since I've given this format of class. So I pray for your forgiveness, for your blessings, and please bless me that I may be able to share something useful and resourceful in all of our spiritual journey. Hare Krishna. So I wanted to do something different because you see, Srila Prabhupada has given us one of the most incredible and beautiful teaching, philosophy. But not only that, he had actually instructed his disciples, and he had instructed all of us that we understand this Krishna consciousness to the best of our ability, and then we share it in a way that we have understood it. Otherwise, what it is that, yes, it is conducive, it can be conducive just to hear and repeat, but in the process of hearing and repeating, what have we actually understood? So therefore, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today, which is create a presentation, a slide, and then just share some practical things that I have personally taken from this particular verse, and perhaps maybe it can help us in our own way of living to be a bit more Krishna conscious. Hare Krishna. So the title of today's Bhagavad Gita class, if there is a title, it's called The Silent Enemy. Let's see if I can do this. So the silent enemy. When I say silent enemy, what comes into your mind? Like, I know is like, what kind of, like, silent enemy means that enemy that we do not know of. That enemy that has a presence, but at the same time, we're not aware of that presence until it becomes too late. And so similarly, that analogy can be used for the mind. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the mind can be one's best friend, or it can be one's worst enemy. It can be a companion, or it can be an enemy. So silent enemy is as such that we think it is our friend, but often it actually turns against us, and it does more harm to us than good. Because think about it, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So therefore, if we're perplexed mentally, and we're experiencing so many challenges mentally, then it is very difficult to be able to see the beauty in which Krishna has actually designated in our life, to be able to make progress, to be able to make advancement, to be able to serve. So actually, silent enemy, it's an incredible analogy. So one thing that I really want to start this discussion with is Balvamangala Thakur's pastime story. I don't know how many of you know that pastime, but it's a pastime about one incredible personality, one Brahmana. And this Brahmana was meditating for so many years on Krishna, and he was practically close to perfection. But then what had happened was that his meditation got disrupted by this prostitute. And so what had happened was that he was so close to the perfection of life until this prostitute came, and then he started chasing her to the end of the worlds, practically climbing mountains, swimming across the oceans, putting his life on so many occasions at risk just to enjoy this woman called Chintamani. just to enjoy her. He had practically wanted to give everything up just to be with her. So it's an incredible pastime that I heard recently, because it is similar to our own life. If you actually think about it, we are so fortunate. We have been blessed with Krishna consciousness. It's right before us. This is even more beautiful than a touchstone. This is even more priceless than all the golds, all the silver, everything in this world. We're so close to the goal, and yet we're so distracted by the temptations or the sound of material enjoyment around us. And so think about it. Think about it. It's taken us millions and millions and millions of lifetimes to come to the point where we are at right now, where we're so close to achieving perfection, and yet we're getting so distracted. We're climbing the mountains of material enjoyment, not realizing that we're about to fall into a pit that is so difficult to climb from. So it reminds me, it's similar, isn't it? And so therefore it says here, so Chintamani said to Balva Mangala Thakur, you are so attracted by this skin. If this much attraction you would have to Krishna, how would it have been nice for you? So this is what it is, that actually the mind, we cannot silence it. The mind will always find something to be attached to. But the question is, what will we choose to attach the mind to? If we choose to attach the mind to sense gratification, then what happens is that sense gratification is futile. It's insubstantial. Futile in the sense that even if we get there, even if we achieve that, does it 100% guarantee us success? Like nowadays, when you go to the shop, you buy these kind of product and it says 99% kills off bacteria. This is the reality, that this world cannot actually guarantee you happiness. This world cannot guarantee you satisfaction. This world cannot guarantee you what you're looking for. So therefore, it's a 99% chance. Not 100%, but that's what Krishna consciousness offers. Krishna consciousness offers 100% guarantee that you practice this, that you chant sincerely, with purity, Srila Prabhupada said, with enthusiasm, and then we experience that transformation in our heart. We experience that transformation in our consciousness. The problem is that we take our material concept of understanding what change and transformation is, and then we try and implicate that into our spiritual life. So therefore, that means that in material life, if I do A and B, then I will in return get C and D. But in spiritual life is that if I do so and so, I may not necessarily see the progress with my naked eyes, but that progress is there. Because that progress is coming in the form of a root, a deep root that then becomes difficult to actually break us, break our spirit, break our faith, break our conviction and our determination. So therefore, it's like, in Shastra, in the Purana, the analogy that is given is like the tree and the reflection of that tree. We may not necessarily see immediately the change, the progress, but it's there. And we have to have faith in that. We have to have conviction in that. So therefore, that's what it is that if we pursue material success, it cannot 100% guarantee us success. An attachment will always be there, but the question is, what are we attached to? And if we're attached to spiritual progress, if we're attached to spiritual, if we're attracted to a life of service, then what happens is that actually then transforms our character. And I'm going to move on to that, what that means. So Prabhupada said, for man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense object is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense object is the cause of liberation. So it's our absorption. What are we absorbed in? And can I tell you a secret? Sometimes we can be in spiritual community and we can often be absorbed still in the wrong things. That's how subtle the mind is. That's why it's called the silent enemy. Because an enemy is always in stealth mode. An enemy is always lurking and doesn't necessarily always make itself obvious. And so similarly, even in our spiritual lives, even in our spiritual community, we may be coming from Mangalarti, we may be chanting 16 rounds, we may be following the 4 regulative principle, but yet we have to be conscious, we have to be aware. This awareness is so important because often we may not realize it under immediate on the immediate side, but slowly our consciousness is actually becoming absorbed in the wrong things. That's why it's so important to be introspective. That is why it's so important to evaluate our lives on a regular day-to-day basis. What am I actually absorbing my consciousness in? Did you actually know that you can be chanting 16 rounds? You can be doing deity worship. You can be going out on Harinam. You can be going out on book distribution. And yet there could be this subtle sense of sense enjoyment. I am amazing. I am great. And this is what it is. I am this idea that what I'm feeling and who I am, we need to be able to make that distinction. This concept of I'm this, I'm that, that's the false ego. And the self is trying to actually liberate itself from the false ego. So this is so important to evaluate in our life, that am I really and sincerely doing this for Krishna? Or am I doing this to actually feed my false ego? Am I really doing this out of the mood of humility and sincerity and this eagerness? And I'll get into that because Narottam Das Thakur actually talks about this beautiful concept, how our material qualities that are actually binding us and dragging us down, we can actually transform that into spiritual qualities to come closer to Krishna. So we have to ask, you say that your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your unguarded thoughts. So these unguarded thoughts we have to be careful of, we have to be conscious of. No one else can do that for us. We have to journal. We have to write these down. So this is what it is that we don't realize that because these emotions, these feelings, there's different levels to it. It's not just envy. It's not just I'm jealous of this person. Envy, there's so many different categories of envy. There's so many different categories of anger. And we don't even realize this until it gets too late. So we have to be conscious, and when it gets too late, then it's hard to change it. It's hard to transform it. So we have to be careful. We have to be conscious. So Narottam Das Thakur says, I will engage my lust in eagerness to serve Krishna. So this is something we can remember. Next time we are feeling lusty, you see, this is the thing. Our mind only has as much ability over us as we allow it to. If we think that our mind is stronger than Krishna, if we think that our mind is stronger than Krishna's mercy, Krishna's blessings in the form of the Vaishnavas, in the form of Shastra, in the form of Guru, then we will always carry on continuing on being subdued. We must realize that actually nothing is stronger than the mercy of the Vaishnavas. There's nothing even stronger than the Shastra. If we live our very life on the basis of Shastra and on the guidance of the Guru. And here's the thing. Sometimes we may not like devotees that come us and correct us. Sometimes we may not like devotees that come us and give us as instructions because we think to ourselves, this is not my senior. Who is this person? This is not someone that knows me. This is not someone that has relationship with me. Like, how does he know me? How does he know my character? Sometimes people may not be telling you what they're observing from you. They may be telling you what you have to be careful of in the future. Not every feedback is relevant to that period of time. Some feedback you have to be conscious and wary of because there are signs. There are signs that you're emitting that things can turn worse for you if you don't take these feedbacks. So we have to take every feedback as a constructive feedback, even if we don't agree with it, even if we may not necessarily like it, because those feedbacks can actually be the very thing that will actually rescue us from degradation. The very thing that will actually protect us from fall down in our spiritual life. But again, that requires some degree of actually letting go of this pride. Turning pride and transforming pride into humility. Turning and transforming lust into eagerness to serve Krishna. I will use anger against those who are envious of devotees. Sometimes people say that devotees cannot be angry. Devotees cannot be envious. But these emotions, there's a spiritual aspect of it because this entire material creation is a reflection of the spiritual world. That means everything that we see, everything that we experience here, there's a purity to it. We shouldn't fear it. You see, the thing is, they say that attachment and aversion are the same side or different side of the same coin. We shouldn't fear anger. We shouldn't fear envy. We shouldn't fear jealousy. We should try and utilize it in its right context. We should try and utilize it in its right sense, because when we do that, then we can make progress and we can help others make progress. So it's important. Anger is not a bad thing. Anger can be used to protect devotees. Anger can be used. You can be angry for seeing the suffering in the world and then do something about it. You can be angry when you see that a devotee is being criticized and stand up for that devotee. There are so many occasions we can use anger. There are so many occasions that we can use envy. Not only that, I will be greedy to hear the topics of hurry in the association of devotees. Greed is something that we cannot avoid. At some point, in some time of our life, we are going to experience greed. It is the nature of who we are. But again, like even in the spiritual world, even the gopis, they experience, they're hankering, they're greedy, but they're greedy to serve Krishna. They're envious, but their envy is not the envy that pollutes and contaminates their consciousness and the consciousness of people around them. But it's this envy that is so sweet, that is so inspiring. Like when they see others are serving Krishna better, it's not like, oh, why did they? No, it's like, I want to serve Krishna also better. So we can be greedy, but we can be greedy for service. And that quality of greediness, what it then does, it inspires us and it inspires people around us. You see how toxic emotions can be damaging, and healthy emotions can actually empower an atmosphere, an environment. It can surcharge spirituality. Emotions are not bad. It's how you utilize emotions. Similarly, a knife is not bad. It's how the doctor or the criminal uses the knife. If a doctor uses a knife to save someone, then that knife is not a bad thing, it's good. But if a criminal uses that knife, then that knife also becomes a bad thing. So emotions are not bad, it's how we utilize, where we channel our emotions. So then Hari says, I will be illusioned if I fail to achieve my worshipful Lord, and I will feel proud to chant the glories of Krishna. So we all have pride, but we should be proud in one sense that we have come into contact with Krishna's devotees, that we have come into contact with Srila Prabhupada's books, that we have come into contact with Bhaktivedanta Manor, and we have come into contact with seeing Radha Gokulananda. When we become proud of these things in a healthy pride, then what happens is then we want to share that with others. We don't want to destroy others. We don't want to become an obstacle. You see, this is an amazing thing to remember. Did you know that indirectly you can become an obstacle to someone else's spiritual journey? Vaishnav aparad is not just, it's not black and white. It's not that I just do something or say something and then that devotee becomes offended. Sometimes what it is that you can actually be a culprit. You could be a side culprit. You can also contribute to a Vaishnav aparad by actually creating or designating a situation in which a Vaishnava commits an aparad. So let's say that you may have not personally said something to offend someone, but you may mention a certain topic, and then that devotee may actually go on a tangent about how he hates this, hates that, or angry at this devotee. But you were the catalyst. And this is what we must be careful of. Not to be a catalyst for a crime that can take place. So we have to be really conscious of this. So you can be proud, but be proud for the right reasons. Hare Krishna. So all of you know this. This is Dhritarashtra. And so when Krishna came to actually create peace and try and prevent the war, what did Krishna say? Krishna tried to stop Dhritarashtra, like stop this war, this senseless fighting. There's no reason for. What did Dhritarashtra say? Dhritarashtra said, "Oh Yadava, please don't blame me for the battle because I am helpless." How can the most powerful person be helpless? What does this helplessness come in the form of? This helplessness comes in the form of attachment. Dhritarashtra was so attached to his son. He was so attached that he could not see logic. He could not see that one of the greatest war, the greatest casualty would take place. And so therefore, my dear friends, my dear devotees here, we must also be careful of this attachment. Because when there's attachment, when there's a strong sense of attachment, then our rationality, our logic, our ability to distinguish between right and wrong disappears. And often then what it is that we get into the wrong action. We get into the wrong habit. We get into the wrong situations and circumstances, even if it may not be who I am. So therefore, this is an attachment that we must be careful of. How can we be careful of attachment? By actually understanding this. We're not just this mind. We're not this mind. We must understand that. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that then higher than the mind is intelligence. Then eventually higher than the intelligence is the soul. We're not the mind. We can utilize the mind as an instrument to make a progress in our spiritual life, but we're not the mind. When people identify themselves with their mind, what do? They identify themselves with their career. They identify themselves with the relationship that they're in. They identify themselves with the wealth that they've made. They identify with everything that they are not, but then in the process they forget who they are. So we're not the mind. But then also, not just only the mind, not just only on the physical platform, there's then also the subtle platform. We're not the intelligent, we're not the ego. What are we? We're a spiritual being. We're a spiritual being having this human experience of life. So therefore, just as many people, like in the past, we've had a program where people that are going through addictions have come to the temple. This process of Krishna consciousness is a process of recovery. We're recovering from the illusion of who we thought we were. And then what it is, we are discovering who we really are. This is a recovery, discovery process. And that takes time. If someone is going through an addiction, it doesn't just happen overnight that they're cured from their addiction. And sometimes along the journey, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they may come back to their addiction again. But the most important thing is we shouldn't give up. The most important thing is we shouldn't lose faith. The most important thing is we should carry on. Just like an addict, after 3 years, he may go back to drinking, but if he gives up, then he's failed. But as long as he carries on, then there will always be a success. And that is the success of our spiritual life. This is one thing that we must get out of our head. Spiritual life is not meant to be an easy process. Spiritual life is not meant to be like just a perfect, successful process. There will be problems. There will be challenges. Sometimes we will get deviated. But the glory of spiritual life is how do we then reconfigure back ourselves on the path. Again, I repeat, this is a process of a recovery, discovery. And this is what it is. Maharaj Yudhishthira once mentioned this beautiful thing. He said that hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death. So he was asked once here, what is the most fascinating thing? And Maharaj Yudhishthira answered that the most fascinating thing is that hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death at every moment, but a foolish living being nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing. So our problem in this material world is of two. The reason why we struggle so much is because of two. We're either lamenting so much, we're angry, we're guilty, or on the other hand, we're trying to control, we're trying to be anxious, and we're trying to search for happiness. So let me tell you something. Again, like I said earlier on, emotions are not a bad thing if it will actually help us to progress in our spiritual life. What do I mean that? Let's take guilt, for example. Let's take guilt, for example. Guilt, if we actually wallow up in our guilt, if guilt overwhelms us, then that is an unhealthy emotion. But simultaneously, we can actually take the emotions of guilt. We can ask ourselves, why am I feeling this guilt? What have I learned from this guilt? And how can I actually progress based on this guilt I'm feeling? So you see, emotions can actually often be an indication of where we need to go in our life, if it's actually utilized in a healthy manner. Anger. Why am I feeling this anger? What have I learned from this anger? And how can I move forward with this anger? So again, I repeat that these emotions are not a bad thing. Shishi Radha Gokulananda ki, Shishi Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shishi Gauranitai ki. So the thing is that, my dear friends, is that we need to be present. The reason why we struggle to understand these concepts is because we're not present. Our mind is constantly wandering in the future, constantly wandering in the past, that we're not present. To be Krishna conscious means to be present. Because it says that the name in itself says that conscious. How can you be conscious if you're not present? How can you be conscious if you're not aware? Krishna conscious means to be present. And when you are actually, here's a beautiful thing. All of you are worried about the future, right? But the future is an extension of the present. So therefore, when we actually become present, when we live in the present moment and we act in the present, then that is actually creating the future. But often we worry so much about our future that we actually neglect and we forget that we can create, we can design that future. Krishna has given us that ability. He has given us that option and that opportunity. But the question is, what are you doing about it? So here's a beautiful thing. Srila Prabhupada says, there is no one in the creation who can claim that he is not controlled. Everyone, regardless of how important or powerful, has a controller over his head. Krishna, however, has no controller, therefore he is God. So we're trying to be small controllers in both negative and positive means, but Krishna is the supreme controller. And when actually we surrender our problems to Krishna, when we surrender our challenges to Krishna, when we actually surrender our difficulties to Krishna, then Krishna gives us confidence and relief. Confidence in being able to move forward in our life, especially in times of anxiety. And also relief, because then what it is that material nature, it may affect us, but it cannot subdue us. So confidence and relief. So sometimes people may say that I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but I'm still struggling. I'm still, I still feel like the same person. I still feel like this is problem, that problem. But this is why. It's because even in our own spiritual life, we try and be a controller. And what happens is that when we try to control, these are the different emotions and feelings that we experience. So let's say, for instance, in your career, in your own life, you experience some level of success. So maybe it could be a career, maybe it can be a relationship, maybe you have found the love of your life. Whatever it may be in your personal life, something that you define as success. If now you think that I am the controller, I am the one who's made this success, I am the one who's found this job, like one of my friends recently got a job. Now, if that friend thinks that I am the one who's actually achieved this, then what happens is pride comes in. Then what it is that we try and reign the kingdom of God, but without God. We think we are God. And then this is when we experience calamity, identity crisis, difficulties and challenges, because really and truly, nothing is in our control. Maybe things around us, but nothing outside as such. We can't control our ability not to die. We cannot control, there's so many things. We cannot even control the organs in our body. It comes into we come into this world, we're able to breathe, and at some point we stop breathing, the organ stops functioning. We can't control that. Can you control your heart from beating? Can you control your lung from taking air? We can't control this. So this is what happens, pride. Failure. Now, if I think that I am the controller and I fail, then what happens is I get frustrated. I get angry. I get overwhelmed. Another example, difficulties. When we experience difficulties, we blame. Oh, it was that person's fault. Oh, it was her fault. The reason why my relationship is not working is because my wife is not doing the things that she should be doing. The reason why my relationship is not working is because of this criteria, that criteria, this situation. And when we blame, we cannot change our situation. So let's flip that around. Now, if we start seeing that, hey, Krishna is the controller, then success doesn't make us proud, it makes us humble. Krishna is so amazing that he has put me in the position where I can do a nice service. Whether it's in my career, whether it's in my relationship, whether it's in my temple life, whether it's in my service to clean the temple room, to clean the toilet, to do this, to do that, then we never think that any service is beyond us. And that's what they say. They say that if service is beneath you, leadership is beyond you. So therefore we become humbled. Krishna has given me this fortune, so let me try and make the most of this fortune. Srila Prabhupada was given instructions by his spiritual teacher, and any success that he had experienced, he never said that this is my success. I'm the one who's found ISKCON. I'm the one who's did that. I'm the one who did that. He was always like, this is actually the mercy and the blessings of my spiritual teacher. His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is the beauty. Another one, failure. When we fail, Srila Prabhupada failed on so many occasions, but did he become overwhelmed? No, he became more determined. They say that one failure is just a step closer to another success. That's the beauty. Failure is there to teach you. Failure is there to humble you. Failure is there to make you realize you're not the controller. If a relationship is failing, it doesn't mean that's it. It means what can we do to evaluate? If our spiritual life we feel like is declining, it doesn't mean that this is not for us. It means what needs adjustment? What needs evaluation? What needs correction? You know, if someone cannot play Madanga or whatever it is, it doesn't mean I'm not good at Madanga. It just means what little tweak do I need to make? So failure should make us more determined if we leave it to Krishna. Difficulties. So difficulties, instead of blaming, we become more reflective. We don't think to ourselves, Krishna, why does bad things happen to good people? Why is that I'm always suffering? Why is this always happening? We become reflective. This is the material world. This is the nature of this world. Param dukkha dukhi. You know, there's so much difficulties and challenges, and we see difficulties and challenges from other people. We try and feel that, and we try and serve. So you can do this. This is a good indication. I control or Krishna controls. And there's certain things that we can practically do. Often people think that spiritual life is just philosophical, that is just something from the book. You know, when we first come here, we take Bhakti Shastri, we take the Veda course, we take that course and this course. But then if we actually become negligent, then we just become jnanis. We become you see the problem with that, the challenge with that is that when we just simply become jnanis, we become also hard-hearted. If our whole life revolves around just knowledge, we drown. And then what happens is we become desensitized. Then we're not able to feel. And what is the spiritual world? The spiritual world is a place of emotion. It's a place filled with emotions. And this material world that we're living in is a practice for that. We must feel compassion. We must feel love. We must feel all these emotions, sadness, all these emotions, we must feel it. But we can feel it for the right purpose. We can feel it for the right reasons. And there's things that we can practically do to make that adjustments. For example, what are we eating? Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 14 talks about food in the mode of goodness, food in the mode of ignorance, food in the mode of passion. So you can all ask yourself, when you go home, what sort of food are you eating? Are you eating food that influences you and carves you to be more passionate? Are you eating food that influences you and carves you to be more ignorant? Or are you eating food that carves you and shapes you to be more goodness? And not just people that live home, also in temple life. It's not just about the quality of food, it's also about the quantity of food. Because if we can eat so much of even goodness food, but if we eat too much, then it makes us lethargic. It makes us lazy. We have to be conscious of this. Srila Prabhupada always said, be conscious before Krishna conscious. So it's not just food, rest. What time are you resting and what time are you waking? It's not just a question of, I'm going to wake up whenever, chant my 16 rounds, come for Mangalarti. Yes, I've slept at 11 p.m., but it's fine. I'll wake up at 3 or 3:30 or 4. And then, no, your sleep has to be also of a quality. What time are you sleeping? What time are you resting? I think Bhaktivedanta Manor himself, or from one devotee himself, said that actually the recommendation is half an hour before you rest, try and read something light. Try and listen to something light. Maybe a little soft kirtan. Maybe you just read a light book, Krishna book, as the recommendation is. Srimad Bhagavatam in the morning, and in the evening before you go to sleep, Krishna book. And then that will actually settle you into your sleep. Sometimes I've lived with devotees that it's like when they're sleeping, they're talking about this and that and, sorry and this. They're just kind of talking about all these kind of things because what is the quality of your consciousness before you go to sleep? And my Guru Maharaj said that. My Guru Maharaj said, actually, when we sleep, it's so important the consciousness in which we sleep because you never know, you may never wake up from your sleep. And the last thing on your mind could be the very thing that will actually bring you back into this world again as something you may not have wished for. So what is the quality of your sleep? What time are you sleeping and what is the last thing? My Guru Maharaj has this habit that up when he's sleeping above on the wall, he's got a beautiful picture of Radhe Shyam. And so he sleeps, and the last thing he sees is Radhe Shyam. And the last thing he says is Radhe Shyam. So then you know that, like, even if I leave the world today, sleeping, at least it's going to help me to get a better life in the next life. So you can do that. Maybe read a little quote from Shastra, maybe look at a beautiful picture of the deities, whatever it is that will help you to have a quality sleep. Discussion. What is the quality of your discussion? They say that small minds talk about people. Average mind talk about situation. And spiritual mind talk about Shastra. They talk about change. They talk about transformation. So what is the quality of your discussion? And I think one thing that we're often afraid of is that, because especially in the society that we're living in, where we want to be liked, we want to be acknowledged, we want to be recognized, especially within a community such as this, that we often compromise our values. We compromise who we are and we lose ourselves. But we must ask ourselves, what is the quality of my discussion? And perhaps possibly, who are the people in my life that, I'm not saying let go of them, but perhaps maybe who are the people in our life that we must learn to distance ourselves from? Because they're not benefiting the quality of our consciousness. And maybe one day when I get strong enough in my spiritual life, maybe I can try and help that person also. Because spiritual life is not about selfishness, it's about selflessness. And selflessness often requires to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. Not only that, home. For people that are living in the temple, what is the state? And for people that are living at home, what is the state of your environment? Again, in the Bhagavad Gita, you can find this description. People that are often, like, they leave their room or their house or their lockers in a very messy state, that's ignorant. And then people that are like food is everywhere, that's passionate. But then people that are organized, everything is categorized, everything's clean, that's goodness. And that also reflects on the state of our consciousness. Cleanliness is a two aspect. There's external cleanliness and internal cleanliness. And often what it is, our external cleanliness to some degree can help our internal cleanliness. And our internal cleanliness can also transform our external cleanliness. So we must work on that. So these are some practical things we can do. And lastly, before I conclude, what can we practically do to transform our consciousness? What can we do to control the mind? Often people say, I can't control the mind. Yes, and actually in the Bhagavad Gita it also says that the mind is as strong as the wind. To control it is difficult, but by the process of detachment and practice, then one can actually overcome it. So what can we practically do? So these are things that you can actually practically do in your life as soon as you leave this temple room. What can you do? So there's 5. The first thing, like I have mentioned earlier on, is your association. There's a saying that birds of feather flock together. Srila Prabhupada had always warned us that we must associate, and that's why he himself always warned his disciples not to associate with Mayavadis, not to associate with people that can contaminate the consciousness, because that is even worse. It's like a poison that enters into our consciousness and it's very difficult to get it out. When you have a negative conversation, conversation, it's very hard to get it out of your head. It may take a few days, actually, often, isn't it? You can try and be as pure as you want, but it's difficult. So what are the sort of people in your life? Are they inspiring love, compassion, a service attitude, truth, humility, appreciation in your life? Or are they inspiring lusty emotions, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy? So not just the quality of people, but then also the books that you're reading. What types of book are you reading? It's so important because actually, and Srila Prabhupada said, my books are not just to be distributed. My books are also to be read. My books are to be understood, is to be applied. You see, people don't care how much you know. People don't care how much you've got to say. They look at your action. That's why they say action speaks louder than words. What is the quality of your character? What is the quality of your characteristic, your personality? In times of it's easy in times of easiness to be a saint. It's easy to be a pure devotee when everything is smooth. But in times of difficulties, in situations where there's perplexities, then your true character comes out. Then in times such as that, who are you? Prabhupada said that our whole life is a preparation for the time of death. That this is our bhajan. From the moment that we're born to the moment that we're leaving this world, this is a practice for what we will remember at the time of death. So if we want to remember Hare Krishna, if we want to remember Krishna, if we want to remember something spiritual, then we have to live our life in a way that it is spiritual. You may be able to cheat your friends. You may be able to cheat your family. You may be able to come across pure devotee with your friends and families and people around you. They may believe you. They may get fooled by your act, but Krishna never gets fooled. The law of karma works so perfectly. So therefore, even if you fool everyone at the time of death, you can't fool Krishna. You can't fool yourself. You know more than anyone the adjustments you need to make in your life, the changes you need to make in your life. And guess what? Nobody's going to do it. You have to do it. So it's not just spiritual people, it's not just spiritual books, but it's also spiritual sound. And that also connects with spiritual people because the quality of discussion you're having. And also spiritual places. That's why Srila Prabhupada had actually recommended all of us maybe once a year to go to Vrindavan Dham, to go to these spiritual holy lands. Because what it is that energy, that atmosphere, that environment actually surcharges and it gives us a different vision of life. Yes, it's nice to be in the UK. It's nice to preach here. But we must replenish, we must rejuvenate, we must develop a broader vision, a very spiritual vision. And so sometimes it's nice to go to spiritual dhams. And not only that, the most important, the most beautiful thing is we must take darshan of Radha Gokulananda. Come here. And then it's not that we're taking darshan. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur once said that don't live your life in a way that you're trying to see Krishna, but live your life in a way that Krishna sees you. You know, sometimes people come to the temples like, I'm taking darshan. No, Krishna's taking darshan of you. But live your life in a way that Krishna wants to take darshan of you. Live a clean life. Live a humble life. Live a pure life. Because ultimately, what more is there? With that being said, that is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time, for your patience, and I'm really sorry if I have offended anyone. I'm very sorry that if I sounded a little bit harsh or anything. Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question? Do you have any tips on how we can journal in a Krishna consciousness? Yeah, so Keshav Swami, he actually created this beautiful workshop around journaling. And so I think what it is that the problem is many of us don't journal. You see, we have what is called this reflective side of us and we have this impulsive side of us. So journaling allows us to tap more into our reflective aspect of who we are. And so one thing that we can do when we journal is that we can reflect and think of certain situations of milestones. Maybe something particular happened that made me behave a certain way, think a certain thing, or act in a certain way. And what we can do is we can journal what was going on in our mind during that period of time. That's one. What was the environment and situation during that time? That's two. And maybe we can even journal like, what could we have done about it? That's three. So observation of myself, observation of people around me, and also observation of that particular situation. So we can journal. So what's going on inside of me, what's going on around me. The two actually often has an impact with one another. It's like two things that are kind of creating friction. Thank you so much. Any thought? Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. I'll conclude there. Anta Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nittai Gaur Pramanande. Hare Krishna.
You turn it on? I know. It's not this person. Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arati Kasha Chande Arati Kashopha Jana Vitatavane Jagamanalopa Dakineni Daichan Vamegadata